The tape tell its story. Not my story. Not the story I wished to see, but the market's own cold, indifferent narrative. This is where the 99% fail. They cannot wait. They confuse activity with progress. They believe they must always be in the market, always doing something. Their hands itch, their minds race, driven by the fear of missing out, the siren call of quick profits. I too felt that pull. I too, in my early days, chased every whisper, every fleeting movement, convinced that if I did not act, opportunity would vanish. It was a costly education, paid for with hard-earned capital and the bitter taste of regret. The greatest enemy of the speculator is not the market, but himself, his own impatience, his own greed, his own fear. He buys because a stock is rising, afraid to be left behind. He sells because a stock is falling, terrified of further loss. He does not see the underlying currents, the accumulation and distribution. He sees only the immediate movement, and his emotions dictate his actions. This is the gambler's folly, not the speculator's strategy. I confess, I too once dreamt of effortless riches, of the market bowing to my will. I too had my moments of blind ambition, of believing I could force a profit where none existed. My biggest mistakes, my most painful losses, were born not from a lack of intelligence, but from an excess of human frailty. From the desire to be right, to prove myself, to snatch profits prematurely. This is the psychological battle the 99% lose every single day. They fight the market, but their true war is with their own minds. Waiting is not idleness. Waiting is active observation. It is sharpening your judgment, understanding the ebb and flow, discerning the genuine trend from the mere fluctuation. It is the discipline of doing nothing until the conditions are unequivocally in your favor. The market gives you clues, but it does not shout them. It whispers to the patient, to the disciplined. Another brutal truth. The market will expose every weakness in your character. If you are greedy, it will tempt you into If you are fearful, it will paralyze you at the critical moment. If you are impulsive, it will punish your rash decisions. The 99% refuse to acknowledge these internal demons. They blame the market, the brokers, the news. They never look inward. I learned to cut my losses quickly, without hesitation. This is perhaps the most difficult lesson for the human ego. To admit you are wrong, to close a position for a loss, to accept that your judgment, for that moment, was flawed. The common man holds on to losing trades, hoping, praying, averaging down. He pours good money after bad, convinced that the market must turn, that his initial premise must be right. The market, I tell you again, owes you nothing. It is a mirror reflecting your own indiscipline. Position sizing, too, is a pillar of survival. The 99% risk too much on too little. They gamble their entire capital on a single conviction, a single tip, a single moment of perceived opportunity. They do not understand that the size of their bet determines their longevity. Risking 1% of your capital on a trade allows you to be wrong 99 times and still have a fighting chance. Risking 10% means 10 mistakes can wipe you out. This is not complex mathematics. It is fundamental survival. It is the difference between a calculated speculation and a desperate gamble. My largest profits came from sitting, from waiting, from letting a trend develop, and then riding it with conviction. Not from jumping in and out, scalping pennies. The big money is made in the big moves, and big moves take time to unfold. The common man cannot wait for the big move. He needs immediate gratification. He sacrifices future fortunes for present crumbs. This is the curse of impatience. This is why the 99% lose. They lack the emotional fortitude to endure the waiting, the conviction to hold, the discipline to cut and run when necessary. They trade their emotions, and their emotions are poor guides. I understood that my job was not to predict the market, but to observe it, to interpret its movements, and to act only when the odds were overwhelmingly in my favor. This required a detachment, an almost clinical approach to the tape. No hope, no fear, just facts. The market does not care for your opinion. It cares only for price and volume. And those who learn to read these two elements, stripped of all personal bias, are the ones who begin to separate themselves from the losing majority. They crave action. They crave excitement. I craved clarity. I craved truth. The truth of the tape. The truth of human psychology. The truth that the market is designed to separate the impatient from their money, the emotional from their capital. My greatest victories were not in predicting the future, but in mastering myself, in silencing the internal chatter of greed and fear. In waiting. Waiting is work. It is the hardest work in trading, but it is the work that pays. This internal battle, this constant struggle against one's own nature, is the crucible where the 1% are forged. It is not about clever systems or secret indicators. It is about self-mastery. It is about understanding that the market is a mirror, reflecting your character flaws directly back at you. And if you cannot face those flaws, if you cannot control them, you will remain part of the 99%. Waiting is work. It is the hardest work in trading, but it is the work that pays. The common man, he cannot bear this silence, this inaction. He fills it with noise. He fills it with the chatter of the street, the breathless pronouncements of financial journalists, the desperate tips from men who know nothing. He believes in secrets, in shortcuts. He believes someone else holds the key to his fortune. This is a fatal delusion. The 99% are always looking for a savior, an external signal to validate their hope or calm their fear. They do not trust their own eyes, their own judgment. They trust the voice of the crowd, and the crowd is always wrong at the crucial turning points. I learned to ignore the noise, to filter out the opinions, the rumors, the supposed inside information, because the market, my friends, digests all known information. It discounts all expectations. What remains is the tape, the movement of price, the volume. These are the only truths. Everything else is distraction, designed to fleece the unwary, to separate the impatient from their capital. The great fortunes are not made by following tips. They are made by independent thought, by patient observation, by recognizing patterns that repeat because human nature repeats. The 99% chase every headline. They buy on good news, only to see prices collapse. They sell on bad news, only to watch the market reverse. They are always late, always reacting, never anticipating. Their emotions are manipulated by the daily narrative. A rising market makes them greedy, convinced they are missing out. A falling market makes them terrified, convinced the world is ending. They cannot see beyond the immediate, the superficial. They cannot discern the long-term trend from the short-term fluctuation. Their vision is clouded by hope and fear. I once believed in the power of news, in the certainty of expert opinion. I too, in my youth, paid dearly for that folly. I bought into stories, into narratives, instead of buying into the market's undeniable action. I learned that the market does not care for stories. It cares for supply and demand. And that supply and demand are often manipulated by the very same forces that feed the news cycle. The true operators, the smart money, they act before the news is public. They distribute their holdings as the public buys into the hype. They accumulate when the public is in despair. This is the brutal truth. The market is not a benevolent entity. It is a battleground, and the 99% walk onto it unarmed, their emotions exposed, their minds open to every deceptive whisper. They lack a strategy beyond hope. They lack a defense against their own human weaknesses. They buy on impulse, hold on stubbornness, and sell in panic. This cycle repeats, relentlessly, until their capital is gone. They are victims, not of the market, but of their own undisciplined minds. My journey to the 1% was a journey inward, a journey of self-conquest. I had to learn to trust myself, and only myself, to develop a system of observation and action that was independent of external influence, to understand that the market's job is to fool the majority. And if you are following the majority, if you are listening to the majority, you are destined to be part of the 99%. The market tells you what to do. It whispers. You must be quiet enough to hear it. The 99% are too busy shouting their hopes and fears into the void. They are too busy seeking validation from others. They see a rising stock, and their greed tells them to buy. They see a falling stock, and their fear tells them to sell. They do not see the larger pattern, the underlying current. They do not understand that true strength or weakness reveals itself over time, not in a single dramatic move. I learned to wait for confirmation. Not confirmation from a newspaper, but confirmation from the tape itself. A clear breakthrough, a sustained trend, a decisive move that left no room for doubt. This required patience, immense patience. It required the discipline to sit on my hands, to watch opportunities pass by, knowing that better, clearer opportunities would emerge. The 99% cannot do this. They feel compelled to act, to participate, to prove they are part of the game. This compulsion is their undoing. They are addicted to action, to the thrill of the gamble. I was addicted to profit, to the cold, hard reality of the numbers. And profit, true, sustained profit, comes from discipline, not from excitement. It comes from understanding that the market is a probabilistic game, not a game of certainties. And your job is to stack the probabilities in your favor. This means waiting for the highest probability setups and ignoring everything else. The 99% trade every setup, every rumor, every whim. They spread their capital thin, dilute their focus, and expose themselves to unnecessary risk. They confuse activity with progress. The market, in its brutal honesty, rewards detachment. It rewards the cold, calculating mind that can separate itself from the emotional roller coaster. It punishes the romantic, the hopeful, the fearful. It punishes those who project their desires onto its movements. The 99% bring their entire emotional baggage to the market. Their dreams, their anxieties, their desperate need for quick wealth. And the market, like a merciless predator, senses this weakness and exploits it without mercy. I had to become a student of human nature, as much as a student of the market, because the market is simply a reflection of human nature, amplified. The same greed, the same fear, the same impatience that drives men in everyday life, drives them to ruin in the market. The 1% understand this. They learn to master their own nature first. They learn to separate themselves from the collective folly. They learn to stand alone. This isolation, this intellectual independence, is the price of true success, and few are willing to pay it. I learned that to stand alone was not merely a choice, but a necessity. The crowds, they offer comfort in numbers, but in the market, comfort is a prelude to ruin. They sought validation in consensus, in what others were doing or saying. I sought validation in the tape, in the cold, hard facts. My greatest education came not from my wins, but from my most crushing defeats. Each loss, a brutal instructor, teaching me the precise consequences of human frailty. My early mistakes were not unique. They were the very same mistakes the 99% make today. Acting on impulse, holding on to hope, letting small losses become catastrophic. I too felt the sting of regret, the burning shame of foolishness, but I did not allow it to break me. I allowed it to teach me. The market has no mercy for those who trade on hope. It is a machine for transferring wealth from the impatient to the patient, from the emotional to the disciplined. The 99% come to it as if it were a casino, betting on luck, on a feeling. They do not understand that it is a serious business, demanding serious study, relentless self-analysis, and an iron will. They confuse activity with opportunity. They believe they must always be engaged, always speculating. This constant need for action, for the thrill of the trade, is a psychological addiction. It blinds them to the obvious. It prevents them from seeing the clear signals. It forces them into positions born of boredom, not conviction. I learned that the true game is not predicting the future, but reacting to the present. To observe, to interpret, and to act decisively when the conditions align. This required a profound shift in perspective. To detach from the outcome, to focus solely on the process. The 99% are fixated on the money. They see the rising numbers, and greed takes hold. They see the falling numbers, and fear paralyzes them. Their focus is external, on the profit or loss. My focus became internal, on my own adherence to my rules, on my own discipline. The profit was a consequence, not the primary driver of my actions. This is a subtle but monumental difference. The market will always present opportunities. But not every opportunity is for you. Many are traps, designed to lure in the unwary. The common man, driven by the fear of missing out, jumps into every perceived chance. He chases stocks that have already moved, buying at the top just as the smart money is distributing. He is always late, always on the wrong side of the major movements. My rule was simple. Wait for the clear signal, the unmistakable breaking of a trend, the moment when the market itself confirms its direction. Until then, I did nothing. I conserved my capital. I conserved my mental energy. I conserved my discipline. The 99% expend all three prematurely. They talk of instinct or gut feelings. I speak of disciplined observation, of patterns that repeat because human nature repeats. The market is a story told in price and volume. And that story, if you learn to read it, is far more reliable than any whisper, any headline, any guru's pronouncement. The 99% are deaf to this story. Their ears are filled with the noise of their own hopes and fears, and the chatter of the crowd. They trade symptoms, not causes. They react to the surface, never delving into the underlying currents of supply and demand. This superficiality is their undoing. A fundamental error of the 99% is their inability to accept being wrong. They cling to losing positions, rationalizing, hoping, praying for a reversal. They average down, convinced that a stock must return to their entry price. This is not trading, it is self-deception. I learned to embrace being wrong, to cut losses swiftly, mercilessly. A small loss is merely the cost of tuition. A large loss, born of stubbornness and ego, is a catastrophe. The market does not care for your ego. It cares only for the truth of its movements. And the truth, often, is that you are wrong. The sooner you accept it, the sooner you preserve your capital for the next, better opportunity. This relentless self-examination, this brutal honesty about one's own biases and weaknesses, is what separates the enduring speculator from the fleeting gambler. The 99% avoid this introspection. They project their failures onto external forces. The market, the broker, the government, the news. Anyone but themselves. But the market, my friends, is merely a reflection. And if you see chaos and loss, look first, within. Your own mind is the battlefield. Your own discipline is the weapon. And your own self-mastery is the only path to the 1%. The 99% seek external validation, external signals, external gurus. They believe the secret lies in some obscure indicator or a whispered tip. This is a profound misdirection. The real secret, the only secret that truly matters, resides within. It is the ability to command your own mind, to silence the clamor of your emotions, to follow a logical plan without deviation. I learned that my trading plan was not merely a set of rules for the market, but a set of rules for myself. It was a shield against my own human frailties. Without such a plan, without an unwavering commitment to its execution, you are merely a leaf in the wind, tossed by every gust of hope and fear. They call it speculation, but for the 99%, it is pure gambling. Gambling on emotion, gambling on rumor, gambling on a feeling. True speculation is a calculated endeavor, a disciplined application of principles to discern probabilities. It is not about taking wild risks, but about managing risk with precision. The gambler hopes for a big win. The speculator works for consistent, disciplined execution. The market will gladly take from the hopeful. It will reward the disciplined. My greatest gains were not born of daring leaps, but of patient, methodical execution of a well-defined strategy. I did not gamble. I speculated with an iron will and a clear head. The market offers no shortcuts. It offers only lessons, often delivered with brutal force. And the most valuable lessons are those learned from one's own mistakes, not from the advice of others. The 99% repeat the same errors, unwilling to confront their own psychological weaknesses. They blame the market for their losses, never themselves. They refuse to adapt, to learn, to evolve. This stubborn refusal to acknowledge personal responsibility is a fundamental barrier to their success. You must be your own harshest critic, your own most vigilant overseer. The market is merely the mirror. Therefore, the path to the 1% is not found in intricate systems or whispered secrets, but within the crucible of your own mind. It is the relentless pursuit of self-knowledge, the brutal discipline to master your own impulses. The market will always be there, a cold, impartial judge, ready to exploit every flicker of greed, every tremor of fear. The 99% fail because they refuse this internal battle. They seek external answers for internal flaws. They blame the market, the brokers, the news, never their own undisciplined play. But the truth, my friends, is that success in this arena is a testament to your personal evolution. It is about becoming the kind of individual who can stand alone, who can wait with infinite patience, who can act decisively when the moment is undeniable, and who can accept error without the crushing burden of ego. It is about transforming from a gambler driven by fleeting hope and paralyzing fear into a speculator guided by cold logic and unwavering discipline. This transformation is not merely difficult, it is painful. It demands an honesty with oneself that most men cannot bear, a willingness to confront the ugliness of their own weaknesses. It demands sacrifice, the sacrifice of instant gratification, of societal validation, of the comforting illusion of certainty. But it is the only way to escape the fate of the majority, to rise above the incessant noise, and to truly understand the silent, powerful language of the tape. It is the journey from being a slave to your emotions to becoming the undisputed master of your own financial destiny. It is the solitary road to true independence. And thus, I became one of the 1%. Not through luck, not through innate genius, but through an unforgiving commitment to these brutal truths, forged in the fires of countless market battles. I learned that the market does not yield to desire, only to discipline. It does not reward hope, only meticulous preparation. It does not care for your intentions, only for your decisive actions. This is the brutal truth. This is the unvarnished reality. If you have listened, truly listened, to these words, it is because a part of you already understands this profound difference. A part of you yearns for this same mastery, this same clarity. If you are one of the rare few willing to face this reality, to embark on this demanding journey of self-conquest and intellectual independence, then ensure you are part of this community. Acknowledge these hard-won truths by engaging with this message. Share your own struggles and insights in the comments below, and subscribe to Livermore Mind. For here we speak only the truth, unvarnished and unforgiving. For those who dare to listen, and more importantly, dare to act.